Welcome to the No Show. My name is Andrea Edwards.
My name is Joe Augustin, and Tim's trying to point at me right now as well. And welcome to the show that tries to give you a different perspective on life so that you walk away hopefully a little smarter than when you came in.
It hasn't worked for me yet, but I'm still here. My name's Tim Wade, trying to get smarter every week with this crew of amazing people. We've got a wonderful guest today. His name is Julian Mather, and he has a history of changing direction in the most remarkable way. A man of transformation and a man of, I guess, the guts and courage and willingness to change from being a sniper in the army. A sniper. I haven't met a sniper before, and quite frankly, I don't really want to. Other than you. You're my favorite sniper, that's for sure. I don't know if I've met any others. And so from a sniper behind the lens of a gun to being behind the lens of a camera to being in front of camera. That's basically been a transformational journey. And along the way, he's been a magician, a YouTube sensation, an educator, an author, and a whole bunch of other things. Welcome, Julian.
Hey, thanks, Tim, Andrea and Joe. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about everything transformational, because I just think it's a really important time that we start having these discussions, because a lot of what I've done is voluntary, but a lot of what is going to happen to people, I think, over the next 10 to 10 years is going to be involuntary, and a lot of people are going to be shocked because they're just not ready for it.
Yeah, totally.
I think so everyone went quiet then. We paused for some sort of effect. I'm not sure what the effect was. But you're right. There is a lot of change happening now, and people are I think people do get change weary, but we need to be change conscious, and we need to be change aware, and we need to be understanding how we're going through it and understanding how a change can impact others as well. And it's a really, really interesting topic. But probably first the news. I don't know.
Yeah. So you want to get stuck into the news?
Let's get stuck into it.
All right.
Well, you know what I could do? I think for anyone who's joining us on the show, I noticed that we haven't done this before. We just don't talk about the format of the show. There's someone joining the show. What we're going to do now is talk about the news. We're going to get through a number of things. The show is mostly about the world in terms of the environment. It's going to be a lot about COVID this time around as well. And then we'll get to the topic of discussion with Julian, which is going to be about, on this occasion, transformation. So that's the way the format works. So this is where Andrea basically does all the reading for us and tries to make us all a little smarter. And I'm glad to see I've done my homework. So now I'm going to hand it over to you. And I think you're over there.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so a test for the three of you. Can you pronounce the name of the new variant?
Omicron.
What? Yeah, well done. So
I'm going with, instead of OMG, I'm going with Omicron.
Nice. So this time last week, we didn't actually even know the name of it. So it was so new that it hadn't been announced. But that's what the news has been about this week, right? I think the whole world is getting a lesson in the Greek alphabet, which is great. But for me, as someone who sort of dives into the news, especially in the breaking news moments, I found this a really incredible sort of case study of how the world works when it comes to information. So basically, there's been a lot of fear, panic, a lot of craziness, but there's also been a lot of opinions. And that's the interesting part, because we don't know yet. When we've always said we're always 2 weeks behind the story of the virus, we are literally 2 weeks behind the story of the virus. So the first thing is the government's acted faster than they've ever acted throughout this entire pandemic. So they got some props for that. Although other people say once it's out, it's out. And as the week has shown, it's out, and it's in multiple countries, even in Japan, which is basically pretty much a closed country and has been for a number of years, for the last couple of years. The other thing that I've been really impressed with is the really strong and powerful voices that have been coming out of Africa. I don't know if you guys have heard any of the medical professionals, the politicians, and just the leaders talking about, first of all, how the way the West has responded was very, very unfair, that they've been punished for doing great work. That they were the first couple of things. But the most important message that came out is This is about vaccine inequality. And the reason that we get a mutation or a variant is because until it's over everywhere, it's not over anywhere, right? So that's been another powerful part of the story. So what do we actually know? Not much. It appears that it is more contagious. Is it more deadly? We don't know yet, because the first cluster in South Africa, and they don't know the original country where this came from, but the first cluster in South Africa was basically university students. So they're younger and healthier, and they had a couple of days and they didn't suffer too much. But the other side, so it hasn't become a generational thing yet. So we don't know that sort of impact on a wider level. But the other thing is that there's been a significant number of hospitalizations for children under 2, and no one understands why that's happening yet. So the 3 things that they look for with a new variant are: 1, how infectious is it? And they know it's more infectious just by looking at what the mutations look like. Will it become predominant? They don't know that. So that's, it could fizzle out, or it could take hold. So beta fizzled out, delta took hold, right? So that's the first thing, how infectious. The second thing is the impact on health income. So this is hospitalizations and deaths. They don't know, because you need at least 2 weeks to know that. And then the third thing is, will it erode immunity that has been afforded by the vaccines? Again, they don't know. So this is where we are. It's a great example of everyone take a breath. Yes, it's a scary time. There's no point sitting in fear. We don't know the real truth. The media are going to jump on headlines. They're going to sensationalize. They're going to keep this story going because they have to, but they don't know, because the scientists don't know. And science takes time. Media doesn't, science does. And so it's a great example of what we've really been talking about. Just, always put that sort of critical lens over all of the news that you're reading, and look across different media. So some of the media I've read has gone into quite a lot of depth about, it's infectious, but then they'll talk about the younger people, they'll talk about the babies. And then the next piece of news I'll read, they'll only talk about it's not as infectious, it's not as bad, right? So people think, oh, this is going to be good. Now, if this is less bad than Delta, this could actually give the world a bit of breathing space to vaccinate the world, but we don't know. So anyway, over to you guys.
Well,
I mean, the world is full of professionals out there doing wonderful things for hundreds of years in medicine and science. And, for me, they're the people I follow. And you're talking about, putting a critical lens over the news. What I do is I actually go on a very, very low calorie diet of news and information. I find that is counterproductive. And, as we'll talk more about change later, if you there is this consistent message, I call it the great discouragement, that comes and it discourages us from taking personal responsibility. We can dive into that, but you're talking about news, and I think, particularly with this, there's so many people talking about stuff they have patently no idea about, and it's not helping anybody.
Yeah. So the two communities we trust the most are our families and friends. So we will believe them above everybody else, right? That's the way the world works these days, and especially with trust so low. So I think it's 2 ways. You either go light, as you were saying, or you go deep and wide, which is what I do, right? But anything in the middle, especially if you're only relying on one source for information, isn't enough information. But your family and friends, if they're expressing opinions about this, they're too early. They're wishes, they're fantasies, they're not truth. And I think it's just a really good case study for that.
Well, I was going to talk about
one source of information, and that's the No Show.
But we have multiples.
Welcome to the echo chamber. Well, for me, what I do look out for are some of the details that are relevant, that are things of concern, because I've been producing the COVID-19 updates from Singapore for NUS for the last 2 years now, and I've been paying attention to what's going on in the science as well. So I help with their microbiology classes as well. They've done 2-3 years of they're coming to a 3rd year now where they're doing an update on the science of COVID. So there's some things that do really concern me about this one. And in terms of communicability as well, people talk about, we don't know yet. The R naught number is in already on Omicron. So we know it's at 2, and that's compared to Delta at 1.6, compared to Beta, which was a much lower number as well. Now, yeah, we can say we don't know if it will become the predominant form, but we know that right now it is the most contagious variant there is. And based on what's happened before, it's very, very likely that Omicron will become the dominant variant in the end. It's just the way it works. Whichever is growing faster is probably gonna take over the infection numbers. Now, the thing is, whether that turns out to be a good or bad thing, that's the thing that we're still, I think, trying to figure out. And I think there is a bit of energy, quite a bit of energy going into we're being too negative. We're panicking. I'm hearing things like that. It's being, all the reactions have been declared as panic reactions. And at the same time, though, I do understand that it does take courage to really be the one to take that initial move. Because even for the folks like the people in South Africa, the team that was responsible for reporting it up the chain, they knew what was going to happen. They knew that as they reported it, this was all going to happen. That the lockdown's going to happen. That because there wasn't enough information, but there was a cause for alarm. They raised it, and the WHO also knew all these kind of things, but they went ahead and did it anyway. So I think one of the things that we do have to really say thank you for is at least South Africa for saying. For having the guts to come out and say, you know what, this is the variant, and we've detected it in our community, and they did that. But the idea of pumping the brakes immediately, especially for something where it's potentially as dangerous, I'm not completely at odds with. I actually think it's a good idea to do that with the view that we have to figure out what's the correct thing to do in 2 weeks, because this thing that we're doing right now, stopping just for a while to see what happens, is actually what we do need to do. We can't just proceed as though it's not going to turn out being dangerous. Yes, the initial cases we've heard about are all mild, but we're also finding out that the situation that these people are coming from are not as neutral. They're actually been they should come from a more vaccinated kind of background, and also from a younger age group, so they don't represent the broad population, and it's too early to call it mild yet. You know what I mean? What you have is, you've seen a lot of cases that are mild. It doesn't mean that we have seen what this variant is going to do in terms of the broader population. So that's my concern. I do feel that at this present moment, people are calling out the restrictions as being a bit on the panicky side of things and overreactions. I don't know. I think if you think about these sorts of panicky reactions, these are exactly the sort of things that we would have wanted to have if we could on day one when they first happened in Wuhan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, one of the things that I think 2 years ago I didn't know what an R naught is. I do now. Can you explain R naught to everybody, because not everybody understands what that means?
Yeah, R naught basically is the number, the factor of infectiousness. So if one person gets it, who is likely to? How many people are likely to get it in the next level of infection? Yeah. So an R naught of 1 basically means it's more or less stable. An R naught of 2 is actually significant in terms of disease, because it means for every 1 person, 2 people are likely to get infected in the next round. So that's a pretty high infectious rate.
It's exponential. That one. That's
anything above 1. Anything above 1 is actually exponential, but a degree of exponentiality, of course. I mean, we haven't actually seen the final numbers as it is, because with Delta, the range that they had come up with was between 2 and 6 actually for Delta. So we'll see what this turns out to be as well in the real world, so to speak, because it is a different world that it's expanding in. In an unvaccinated environment, the R naught factor is going to be very much higher than it is going to be in a double vaccinated society, right? So the R naught factor in Singapore is going to be very low. as opposed to, I guess Africa, where it's not as vaccinated.
Yeah,
I was just reading in the UK's Department of Stats. I've forgotten what it is. The National Government Statistics Department. And as of yesterday, if you're unvaccinated, you're 32 times more likely to die in hospital than if you're vaccinated. So, if there's one thing that we should be doing, it's just one thing we know is our best chances at the moment is just to keep on this vaccination rollout.
Yeah. And in the developing world. So, I'm sitting in a country where they've worked incredibly hard to get the vaccines out. I don't know what the percentage in Thailand is at the moment, but, in South Africa, it's 24% vaccination rates. The vaccination rates are so low in so many countries. And until we get on top of that, we're going to be constantly facing this situation. Tim?
Hey, quick question. It's a bit of a sort of an aside question, but what happened to the 10 letters between Delta and Omicron? Like, there were some really cool letters in there, like Epsilon and Zeta. I mean, the next one's going to be Pi after Omicron. So, everyone's got some Pi.
Let's hope it's not too many.
They actually had they actually had some variants that came up that did not really make much of an impact. I think there was a Lambda, and I can't remember what the other one was, but there definitely
Iota
was some
was
other
very
variants.
small.
But there's also, you can also ask the same question of batteries, because you've got AAA, AA, C, and D. What happened to A and B?
That's true. I mean, A was clearly superseded, but B has just been forgotten.
Yeah.
I guess B was the beta.
Well, I think the contention was actually about, first of all, there was no contention about skipping over the letter new, because that would be confusing, because this is the new variant. What do you mean? It's new? Yes, it's new. No, it's not.
That one I
old
get.
now, because it's new, right?
And Lambda, everyone would stop eating lamb, and Moo, everyone would stop eating cows.
But the one that was contentious was actually about C, I think XI, and that one was skipped over. It wasn't used.
Yeah.
And I mean,
that a China-led skip?
Well, the thing about this is China-led or China-influenced. The WHO is the one that kind of works out the naming of each of these variants. And it's not to be said that China has no influence right now in the WHO. It's actually a very, very influential part of the WHO. And it would be possible that it might not have been externally influenced, but, I mean, if I were on the inside thinking, like, I'm going to name the virus and go like, ooh, this is the same name as the Chinese premier.
Yeah,
I might go another way.
That's going to be a bit of a problem.
Yeah,
I wonder if the whole thing will actually end with Omega.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry, this has been a bit of a nonsensical aside. Perhaps we should get back to the news.
No, it's interesting. But the bigger point is, pay attention, don't panic, get on with your life, be safe, get the vaccine if you're lucky enough to have access to it, because so many people who wish they had access to it aren't. And we've had some people jumping in on comments saying, are you guys vaccine pushers? We believe that the scientific consensus shows that vaccines are the way to end this pandemic. So, and the sooner we do it, the better off, because otherwise we just.
I am a vaccine pusher. I don't want to mince my words here.
Okay,
that's what I believe in.
Yeah, well, living in a part of the world that's suffering as much as I'm seeing, for not just from the pandemic perspective, but from the economic perspective. I want this over for the poorest people of the world, because they're suffering, and we can help them not suffer.
There was I'd be interested in the genome. You know how a lot of people went and bought those little genome kits and then sort of sent their sample off to some lab somewhere, which now has your DNA, like me. So I did that, and I got this report back and everything else. But if they know my sort of genomic sequence and all the various variations, they should be able to tell if I'm at risk. Because remember that there was an article, Andrea, that you and Joe were talking about that really super duper healthy guy that had that genomic variant that meant that he was more likely to have a disastrous reaction, and he was unvaccinated, but he was more likely to have a disastrous reaction because of that missing bit in his genome.
Yep.
And so I was wondering, since they've done the genome thing on me, couldn't they say, hey, go and get the vaccine, especially, I mean, everybody else get the vaccine, but you're at super duper high risk of vomiting blood and dying if you get it. Go off and get it.
So the article that you're talking about is The Life and Tragic Death of John Ayers, a fitness fanatic who refused the vaccine. So there are a couple of aspects to his story. One is he's incredibly fit. He was 40. There's like one of the people that would be considered absolutely no risk. And he died because there's something in his DNA that made him more susceptible to it. But there's another side to the story, which we've talked about before. Joe, do you want to take this one up?
Well, this is the part that people kind of jumped in. As I was reading the article, I realized that it probably was a smaller part of the big story, but everyone realized here's a big name, we'll link him, and it's going to make the story stick more. And that's the role that Tony Robbins played in this particular story. So I've been criticizing Tony Robbins for his view on COVID. He's always been talking about, just working up on your own immunity and you should be fine. It's that whole thing of you don't have to worry so much about it. We should release ourselves from fear, which is very on brand but off science, right?
Yeah.
And the trouble is people borrow from that sense of surety, the certainty that you get from Tony Robbins, and it's infectious, pardon the pun. But it's what people take with them, and they go like, if you have a set of other beliefs that make you worried or dubious or skeptical about the vaccine, and you throw in the endorsement of someone like Tony Robbins, it can make it problematic. So I think within that story, it was mentioned that he was a big fan of Tony Robbins, and they took a little bit of a side tour on the detour into what Tony Robbins has been doing regarding the vaccine. He's been talking about you don't have to worry about this; you can just have natural immunity. But at the same time, one of the VCs that he's a part of has invested in a particular vaccine that's available through. Yeah, some global program. So there's a kind of a confusing thing there, but yeah, he's been really pushing the idea that you don't have to worry about it. It's that let's not live in fear. Somewhere in between there is the correct answer, but I think you can be overly, confident about something like that.
Yeah. So have you actually heard what Tony said?
Yeah, I have because I'm on these live shows that they do every now and then because I'm a serial attendee of online webinars, and he does a few of them now. And yeah, he gets to that point where I go like, well, I don't think this is a good message to be putting out right now, because they try to not overtly say don't get the vaccine or whatever it is, but that language is very clear that he is discouraging the mask wearing, is discouraging. He's trying to say, just lead your life as though nothing's happening, and as long as you're doing things like keeping up your immunity and your health, you should be fine, which statistically is true, but not for this guy.
So yeah. I'm a bit of a, I do like, I think I mentioned in some comment when we were chatting about I'm like an 85% fan of Tony Robbins. And because there's a few things here go, okay, I just don't agree with that. But a lot of what he says, and I've seen a lot of what he said in the past get taken way out of context with a little video clip, and then it's just like everyone bashing Tony. But, if his message is, now I haven't seen him say anything on this, but you have, so I'll take your word for it. But if his message was don't live in fear, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the don't live in fear. But how I don't live in fear is I go and get the vaccine, and then I get on with stuff. And if I'm going to catch it, and I wear a mask, and I get on with, I just do what I'm told, so that I'm not living in conflict with everyone the whole time. If the place I'm in says wear a mask and do this and get a vaccine, I'm going to do it, not because I'm a sheep, but because I'm trusting that they've got first of all the best interest. Secondly, the scientists say so. Third, it's a pandemic, and fourth, it seems to be the thing that if I just do that, I can get on with daily living without worrying about otherwise people be marching around on the offensive the whole time, either abusing people, which is what happens. It seems to be happening in the US. You wear a mask and everyone's abusing you, or people are hiring. I'm not really interested in any of that. I just want to get on with doing whatever it is I want to do. And for me, the way to live without fear is to just do the things that are necessary and get on with stuff.
Yeah.
I
think that if you're a person of influence, you have to be very aware of your words at a time like this in the world, and you have to be responsible for your words. But if you're profiting off your words, especially in relation to a pandemic, and that's in opposition to what the government and the science within the country that you live in are saying, then I think I think you should be held liable. There's no liability for any of this behavior, and we're just seeing it. The last piece of COVID news I wanted to share is it's in New York Times. It's called "They Died from COVID, Then the Online Attack Started." And so basically, all these anti-vaxxers, right, have been, very vocal, and then when they die, their social media profiles get attacked. So their family are grieving, and then they've got to deal with people abusing these people, and you kind of think. You kind of understand how people feel because, everyone who's in opposition to the majority makes it go longer. But at the same time, let's be kind to each other.
Yep, that one's terrible.
Yeah.
That one is, you don't need to attack somebody. I just think that's just appalling behavior. But I get it. I mean, it's human nature. In a way, it's human nature. But we got to be, like you said, Andrea. I 100% agree. We just got to be kinder.
Well, I know Andrew kind of poo-pooed the whole idea of monkey brain thinking, and that was too much of a simple way to look at things. We do suffer from it. I mean, I stand by the simple sort of explanation of things. We just need to belong in our tribes, and we need the other tribe to be wrong. And when we get a chance to, we're tempted to just take the shot, right? It's not the kindest thing you can do, but I think part of what we're trying to do is to have people rise above that. I mean, I think like one of the things that I'm trying to say less of, and I haven't said it in recent years, which is good, is I told you so. It's a kind of way to feel better about yourself, but it really doesn't help anyone at the time, So I'm trying to do less of that. But it is one of those things. We do want to feel. We do want to feel that we were right,
Well, there's a pride and a validation thing coming in there as well, Julian.
There is a pride in that, and yes, we should rise above it, and yes, we should be nicer to each other. But there's actually a purpose, I think, that social media offers an advantage, and that is it also helps diffuse the situation. In one side, it inflames it, but there's a very fine line between attacking someone with your words and then attacking someone physically. And when I've been in a couple of war zones, and it's just and once you've been there and you've seen that, I just go, as far as the way that we run governments here, democracy is flawed. I get that, but I vote for this imperfect system, of government because it's better than the way they do it over there. And I also, with social media, I think that it at least people can get it out. And the other thing, the value I think of it is because people do say what they think. It's not well thought out, but they say it, is that you can identify the enemy fairly easily rather than everything being held under.
The sniper.
I don't know.
No. It's a good point. I remember. I don't know if you guys remember in the 90s, Pauline Hanson had her first run in Australia, and I was in the UK, and it was obviously before social media. And when she ran, there was this sort of these thoughts, ideas were starting to come out of people's mouths that we hadn't heard it before, but it was always there. It was always underneath us, right? And we're seeing it in America. We're seeing it in the UK. This cesspool of hatred and vitriol. And until you feel the permission to speak your truth, you don't. And so that's what we've seen, especially in the last 10 years, that people are feeling free to speak their truth, and it's pretty ugly, but it's there. It's always there. And until we get it out,
I can tell you,
change it.
In the early 90s, I was at a little place called Muddapilly which is west of Ipswich, which is west of Brisbane. And there was a new political candidate rolling out for the first press conference ever. And I remember this woman with red hair coming down this hill. I remember it was late in the winter afternoon and the sun was behind her and she was almost glowing, this red hair. And she got in front of the camera and she was physically shaking like this and stuttering and stammering and made absolutely no sense. And it was Pauline Hanson. It was her first time ever in front of the media. And I turned to the person next to me and I said, that's the last we'll ever see of her. So, yeah, I'm really good at picking them, aren't I?
So she still to this day represents a lot of voices. And I think we need to listen to those voices, and then we don't have to agree with them. But if they have an opportunity to be heard, then we have an opportunity to have a conversation that hopefully moves us all forward. So it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it is a bad thing. I mean, I looked at, like for me, when I think about this, the thought that just kept running through my mind was, like, if we always ask the question, if you could go back in time and you could, take care of Hitler, what would you do? And I'm thinking Julian, the trained assassin, actually was there right at the start, and he used his words instead. No, but I'm just thinking about it in terms of, like, the letting somebody else say the thing, and I'm for the idea, love the idea, but I don't know whether everyone's got the license to operate at that level yet. I think really it would be great if everyone can bring their diverse ideas and therefore disagreements together and have a good conversation on that. But I don't think we do that. I think what happens is we have this conversation where we disagree and we get into a kind of a brawl. I mean, I'm reminded of how when I was a kid in school, there were occasions when you'd be in a fight and someone would come along and say, "What's going on?" And people would kind of forget why they were fighting. And I think we get in that kind of state. We disagree. We enter a different state where we're fighting. And then we don't even remember the real cause of what we're talking about. We're getting upset about things. We get into name callings, and then we start saying, "Oh, that's how low you go and your bunch and this and that," and then we lose sight of the actual argument. So I don't know. I like the idea. I like the world where we can all come together and have different opinions, but I don't think we're all licensed to do that yet.
I would agree with that. I think we have filters. I think civilization has grown from is developed because of an element of civility, and that means editing what we're about to say. And if we're saying we all need to be kinder, it means be kind even if you feel miserable or aggressive or whatever it is to choose to be kind, which is employing a filter, which basically means now I know from a psychology perspective, there's an element of there's an element of release when you're sharing your feelings and ideas, and you can get it out so that it can be discussed. That's from a psychological therapeutic perspective. But on a social media broadcasting to the world perspective, especially when, would you go to a psychologist, lie down on the couch or sit in the seat and have the conversation and be okay with the fact that the whole thing's being recorded for forever and broadcasted to the entire world? Most people will go, absolutely not. But they do it on social media all the time. And so sometimes I don't think the place to do it is there. And I think there's, people need to, it's not, there's this battle here between freedom of speech and the value of speaking your truth, and the reason why I do that is because speaking your truth, somebody's truth might not actually be the truth. So I think it's a bit of a nonsense saying. But anyway, speaking their perspective is probably a better version. And the fact that somebody's is, I think we need to. It's about being mindful of what we say and how we communicate in a way that is going to, it's not going to tear people down this is a difficult one, because when you say it, say something that's not going to tear someone down, say stuff that's going to build people up or help them shift or see transformation or something like that. But at the same time, there are some people that need to be torn down. So, it's only when they get the pie in the face that they sort of think about how did they behave to deserve that and maybe make a shift. Either they make the transformative shift or they go into sort of defensive retaliation.
Can I sum that up, what you're saying, with a very short poem?
That would be better than what I said.
Okay. So this is a poem. It's called The Careful Builder. I saw them tearing a building down, a gang of men in my hometown, with a heave and a hoe and a yes, yes yell. They swung a beam and a big wall fell. And I said to the foreman, are these men skilled like the ones you'd use if you had to build? And he laughed and he said, oh, no, indeed, the most common labor's all I need, because I can build in a day or two what it takes a builder 10 years to do. So I thought to myself as I went my way, which of these two roles am I willing to play? Am I one who's tearing down as I carelessly make my way around, or am I one who builds with care? So my family, my community is a little better because I was there.
Wow.
Yeah, no, that wasn't what I was saying at all.
Oh, that's nice.
No, that was very nice. Very nice.
It's a big topic that we're talking about, and we could do a whole no-show just on what we're saying. But I wrote a blog, I don't know when it was, the problem with casual criticism. And basically I was in this situation where somebody criticized a function that I was attending, and I really care about the people who organize this function. And it was just so easy. It was just so easy to slip out of their mouth, this criticism, right? And on social media and in person, one of the things that I noticed in our world is, we talk about being kinder. I think everyone's gotten meaner. We don't watch our words. We're not aware of the impact of what we say and how it can land on other people. And if we could just pick up our sort of, skills on that again and just be kinder to each other, I think that would make a big difference. But
You're not right. And Julian, that poem was beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow.
Julian, listen, I mean, I can't even remember the words to a Beatles song. So congratulations, and something more obscure than that.
Yeah, I remember. It was one of those things that I saw it years ago and I tore it out, and it just sort of stuck in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
A true storyteller.
You're right as well, because Julian might remember it.
Yeah.
I like it, and I like the fact that you remember it. That's amazing, and it's very true. But at the same time, there are people that need to be held to account. And that might be perceived as tearing somebody down, but it's like so it requires a bit of discernment, a bit of critical thinking, a bit of courage to not say the stuff. But I would argue that based on what Andrea just said before, I think a lot of those criticisms come out because we're in comparison mode very frequently, and they're saying something, and we're comparing it to me, and as a result we're going, is that making me feel up or down? Nope. And as a result we make a judgment, and we either press them down, or we make a criticism that distances ourselves from them, or builds relationship with the person next to us to show how we are, and in a search for validation in some way to build ourselves up, to somehow build ourselves up in the process of pushing somebody else down. And it's to make myself perhaps feel less bad about the fact that they're doing better, or make myself feel okay with the fact that I didn't take the risk that they took, and they took it and got there, and they screwed something up. So then, at least I didn't take the risk. And I feel like there's a lot of internal battles happening when those words come out. And they're coming out for a reason of self-validation in a lot of cases, I feel.
It basically says more about you than the person that you're criticizing, right? And
I think so.
And we just need to watch our words. And it's a self-awareness exercise. So if I feel a thought that's ready to come out of my mouth that is unkind towards another, I really work hard not to say it, because I don't want to say unkind things. And I also spend a lot of time asking where the thought has even come from in the first place. So is it what you were saying? So, jealousy of another, envy of another, such a waste of time. If you're spending time there, you're not spending time doing what you want to do. You know, if you're jealous of somebody else's success, you're not focused on your own success. So stop wasting your time being jealous of somebody else. Cheer them on and get to work on what you want to do. We waste so much time with this other stuff, and it's more. There's more of it, and the world has created more of it. You know, the angry world that we've built especially in the last decade. And if that's one thing that my work could help contribute to solving, I'd be very happy with myself. But just be kind.
There's another line, I think, and that line is because social media has allowed us to be immediately global, and there are cultural nuances to criticism. So from Australia, for example, as you're developing mateship in Australia, a lot of that is through criticism in a joking way, but it has some truth. And you kind of, you know, it's not so much tall poppy, it's you're having a go at someone, but that kind of the banter back builds the respect, and your ability to respond in a witty, fiery, good little, you know, throw another grenade back, and then people go, you know,
yeah, you're all right.
Yeah, you're all right.
It's sledging,
Yeah.
as in cricket, in sport, it's sledging. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a national pastime.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always translate well, does it?
It did. So this is the thing. So with the cross-cultural side, it could turn into meanness, and sledging works nicely if there's co-sledging or responsive sledging. It doesn't work very well when the other person just gets hit and takes offense, and then they come back with not a sledge but a vitriolic attack, and then this person moves from sort of friendly sledging into full-blown aggression, and it's this. You know what I mean? It can go, hey mate, calm down. What's the matter with you? So it can be a couple of the two. So that's where we end up with all these misunderstandings, and you know, go to war.
Well, you know, the thing about comedy, because I've spent too much of my life trying to explain how things are funny to people, and the core of it really has always been when something is wrong, but it doesn't matter, right? And the problem nowadays is we get to the point where things always matter. Everything is something to be offended about. And if not on your terms as well, you know, even if you're not offended by this, you get upset because, you know, but that might be offensive to so-and-so. And that is the problem. We want to be, first of all, expressive. And on top of that, we also want to be loved. And when we are expressive and then in return not loved, we have a bad reaction to that. And social media makes it even worse because we now have an audience. You know, I was reminded of I can't remember.
And a validation button.
Yeah, no, I was reminded by of this particular story. I can't remember the comedian now, but he's talking about, you know, the idea of, you know, when you're attacked by a shark, what you need to do is just punch it in the nose, right? And it's supposed to deflect the shark attack. And then he goes, well, you know. First of all, when you get attacked by a shark and then you punch it in the nose, now the shark gets punched in the nose, but if there are other sharks around, the shark's got to finish the job now, right? Because it doesn't look good if it lets you go, right? So the problem with social media is you are making your personal comments, but in a public space where someone gets to see what's going on. So social media is like reply all, you know, like in the office, someone could give you send you a direct email only to you. Because that's how direct emails work. But, you know, they send it only to you, and you can sort of react to it in a sort of a calm way. But as soon as someone sends you a criticism and sends it to, you know, the whole office, now you got to take blood, right? I mean, and I've done that. I've had the skills to really tear away at someone and everyone else. You know, there's this kind of like subtle applause that happens in the office. They don't do it on the email, but they just stand up from the cubicle and go like, you know. But that's the problem with social media. It's with an audience. If it was just a small room, a conversation where 5 people are just gathered and we all kind of sign up to the same social contract, we could have those conversations. But we tend to have those difficult conversations in unsafe spaces.
Yeah, and one of the things that you're saying, Joe, was that, I mean, that it is with an audience. And I think that when I say we, people who voluntarily go into the public space and express an opinion professionally, is that we've thought about what we say. Well, I mean, I certainly have. I mean, I've got models cut, it's what we do. We unpack it and we try to join the dots, and we think and we go deep on it. But I think when I say the average person, I mean, I don't mean that disrespectfully.
I'll say average Joe. Go ahead. You want to say average Joe? Go.
Joe out there, yeah. Is that you get on there and you haven't done this level of unpacking that we've done, which in a sense, it tempers what you say. Because when you do say something, I think generally it's a little more pointed and directed and thoughtful. And I just think the average person just goes out and throws grenades. I mean, and sometimes they fire back in their face.
Yeah, you're right. And it's a really, really great observation about the sort of work we do. I mean, every word I'll go into and make sure I understand the true essence of the meaning of the word before I use it, because I want to make sure I'm using the right word in the right context, but that's the sort of work we have to do to make sure that we're doing a great job, right?
I just want you to know, Andrea, that as you say we, I'm not included in that list. Tim, I don't know. You want to fess up?
No, I'm definitely that. I'm not your average Joe.
Yeah. But we've got to manage us. We've all got to manage ourselves within the context of this multi-generational environment where people are shooting from the cuff. Different intelligent levels, different education levels, different perspectives on life, different experiences in life, and filtering through that sort of really, I see people reacting to what somebody says and they don't know them. Like, one of my groups, people who don't know each other are shouting at each other. I'm like, why are you even talking to each other? You don't know each other. Like, seriously. And like the argument's so pointless because they don't know each other. Like, so, and they're completely missing the point. Nobody knows where anyone's coming from. And
nobody's going to be convinced.
Yeah, it's like, it's just so stupid, right? So I'm like, hey, be nice to each other. But just don't get involved. And if, someone's participating and they're a moron, just move past them. Just don't feed it, because then your spirit gets part of that negative part of social media and you just move past it. I observe, I watch, I listen, but I don't get involved in it at all, because every now and again I'll pick someone up because they're giving me the shits, like really giving me the shits. But otherwise, I'm like, yeah, you go for yourself. You go for it, mate. You do what you need to do. I'd rather be the voice that I want to be out there in the world rather than participating in something that I don't want to be part of. So that's the way I manage it.
And it's dangerous too to just throw unthoughtful, that's the word, grenades out there, because your reputation is it's so valuable. It's the most valuable online currency that we've got, and it's that saying, it's not who you say you are, it's who Google says you are. And if you go out there and just say things and throw things out there, it's on the record. You are doing yourself irreparable damage.
And you might want to do that, right? There are some people that love that. They love that, and good luck to them.
I love the term unthoughtful grenade. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. There's got to be unthoughtful's the wrong word. I can't think of it. Yeah.
An ill-considered grenade.
Ill-considered. That's it.
All right. Shall we move on to the environment? Because I think we could go along or talk about this for a lot longer. But okay, one good news story in California. They're using owls instead of pesticides to manage the rodent problem in the vineyards. So I thought this was good. So they used to use what is called rodenticides. And you know what? Until I read this article, I did not know that word existed. And now they're turning to owls, and in other parts of the world, they're using different raptors. But basically, since 2021, tougher limits have been placed on using rodenticides, because obviously some of these are permanently in the environment. But the main thing is they're killing birds and other animals that eat rodents, and they're suffering these really traumatic deaths because they've got these poison in their stomach. So it's a good news story, and it's not just happening in the US, it's also now happening in Malaysia, Kenya, and Israel. So this is returning to old time farming practices. So that's a really good news. The other thing,
thanks to the Harry Potter franchise for that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how many rats and mice owls eat. I didn't know. So nurdles, the worst toxic waste you've probably never heard of. Okay. I know about things called plastic pellets, which are made from petrochemicals, and there's particular factories around the world that make them, and they're tiny, like the size of just a bit bigger than a grain of rice, right? And these are the basis of everything that gets created into the plastic products that we have all around us and that we're covering the beach this morning. Anyway, billions of these tiny plastic pellets are floating in the ocean, and they cause as much damage as oil spills, but they are still not classified as hazardous. And it's a very simple step to do this, right? So in May this year, we had the Express Pearl container ship disaster where it was on fire and it sank just off Sri Lanka. Do you guys remember that one?
No. Nope.
Yes,
disaster? Yeah, I thought you would know. It was a Singaporean ship. So it was very much a Singaporean.
In that case, we would definitely not know.
It was loaded with oil and chemicals, and the chemicals included nitric acid, caustic soda, and methanol. So the Sri Lankans were terrified about the impact of this, what it was going to do to the marine life, as well as to the fishing lifestyle of that area, and it's been terrible. But the most significant harm came from the spillage of 87 containers full of these lentil-sized plastic pellets, which are called nurdles. Now, all they have to do, if they call it hazardous, it will mean it'll be in a different part of the ship. And so if an accident like this happens, it has less chance of going into the environment. And so all of us who live on the Indian Ocean, at some point, those nurdles will be turning up on our beaches. So, and this is, to me, this is just stupid humanity, right? We're going to ship these things around the world. Fine, do it in the most secure way possible. Did any of you guys have a chance to have a look at that story?
Yeah, I saw that, and actually it's one of those things I just never thought about it. I never thought about it being out there as part of how it's being shipped. It made complete sense that yes, you would ship this kind of stuff anyway, but it's just one of those things that just completely off the radar. So it's and I think that's the nature of why it's also being ignored, because it's so invisible, not just literally, but in terms of as a thing, that it would get by. People would not realize that. I think it's the way textiles have become the big environmental problem that they've had, because they've been essentially invisible as a problem.
Yeah.
But it was very troubling to see. And the thing about how it behaves as well, it doesn't just behave like a floater. It depends on the density of where it gets polluted or it gets released. And so it can be a deeper level pollutant or a floating pollutant. It's one of those terrible things.
I've done a study. Sorry, I've done a study of how the Great Garbage Patches, right? So in the Indian Ocean, they don't have a Great Garbage Patch. It's a cycle of currents, and basically, eventually, everything goes off the coast of Africa and down south. So I can imagine that the Antarctic is not looking too pretty.
And one of the problems too with this is shipping regulations, because back in the 60s and 70s, what they did, we used to have tankers, but that's when they made super tankers back then. They actually lengthened a tanker because you could get more oil in it, and that's just become the standard. The problem with the super tanker though is just they're physically too long, and a lot of the spills we've had, we wouldn't have had them if we had smaller vessels that essentially don't snap like a pretzel in the center. And I can't see there's any going backwards on that. I think we want to ship as much as we can, but all these problems are definitely multi-layered problems.
Yeah. Although I do think we need to start going back to local manufacturing to reduce emissions. So we're not seeing any movement there. We're seeing the shipping industry is moving towards emissions reductions, whether they are or not, or if it's greenwashing, we don't know. But it's an interesting. So another one on the environment, and then we'll move on. So a new study was released this week, which links major fashion brands to Amazon deforestation. So basically, this report analysed nearly 500,000 rows of customs data, and it found that brands such as Coach, LVMH, Prada, H&M, Zara, Adidas, Nike, New Balance, Teva, UGG, and Fendi have multiple connections to an industry that pops up, Amazon deforestation. So there's more than 50 brands that have multiple supply chains, and they're linked to the largest Brazilian leather exporter, which is called JBS. and they are known to engage in deforestation. There's a couple of big companies in Brazil that are not nice boys. And JBS apparently recently made a commitment to achieve zero deforestation across its global supply chain by 2035. Now, even the governments at COP26 went for 2030. We need to go earlier regardless. But to me, this goes back to this conversation about our own responsibility of supporting brands. We are part of this destruction of the Amazon. We think it's far away, but it's not. If you know that a brand is involved, whether, they have no control of their supply chain is rubbish. They need to be aware of what's going on. They need to know where their products are going for, and they need to take responsibility for it. And us as consumers, we vote with our wallet. So if you know a company's not doing the right thing by the environment, you vote with your wallet. But these guys, JBS, are not good boys.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, that it would be great if we could vote with our wallets, and I think if you live in an affluent country, that's a lot easier. But the affluence in the world is that much compared to people who aren't affluent, and I just think it's worthy to move towards that. We've got to do something, but I think it's going to be a slow path getting there.
The middle class in the world is at around when you sort of do the affluent, like with 1%, yeah. The middle class is somewhere between 2.3 and 2.6 billion now.
Mm. Yeah. I recommend a book if you haven't read it, is Factfulness by Hans Rosling.
Yeah,
it's just a really clear picture. It's a couple of years old now, but it's a really clear picture of actually where the world is at, and that that rising and growing middle class out there, even with all the problems out there, even with Syria, and even the growing level of education of girls at school. There's a companion site that goes with it, and it's really worth going on and having a look. Forgotten what what it's called, but you'll find it. What they've done is they've gone and photographed all these houses in almost every country around the world, and all these communities, and they photographed their kitchens, their bathrooms, their lounge rooms, and you can go on and you just click through, and it's really surprising how similar we all, our basic living standard is quite the same.
Yeah. But the one thing about I love Hans Rosling as well, but the one thing is, in the last 2 years, for the first time, we've gone backwards. So a lot of his data was very hopeful, and he basically was saying to people, this is what most people think, but it's actually the opposite is true. More girls are going to school. Well, now girls are dropping out of school. The climate crisis will see even more girls dropping out of school, and uneducated girls is obviously a problem for societies to move forward. So Yes, I love him, and he's really inspiring, and it's really positive. But in the last couple of years since the pandemic began, we've seen drops for the first time in like 2 decades, which is very disappointing.
Well, that is disappointing to hear.
Yeah. A boys' club report came out this week. I'm sure a couple of you guys are going to really appreciate this. So basically talking about the toxic boys' club that is Australian Parliament.
Oh, gosh,
I can imagine the gentlemen's clubs and the RSSLs with their gaggles of men scoffing at this news and talking about how bloody ridiculous it is, and girls should just get on with it, and they, whatever. Look, a woman should be able to go to work without having her ass groped by an old guy, and she should definitely be able to go to work without the threat of rape. It's time for change, and those who are resisting it are just really not paying attention. Australia is like 20 years behind from a government perspective, not just business, but other governments around the world. So it's a bit of a a mirror on the face, and I know a lot of the people they'll be hating this, but it is time for change. It's inappropriate what's been going on. Did you guys see the report?
What happened?
Oh, you didn't hear? So there's 6 months report going into Australian Parliament and the toxic masculinity that's been going on there. Rapes.
They're groping people.
Rapes in Parliament House. It's terrible for diversity, for minorities as well as women. It's a terrible place for them to be. it's like a boys' club, and they're all going away on a camping trip when they're in Parliament because they don't live in Canberra. So kind of everybody's out drinking, having a good time, and it's not a good place for girls to be, women to be.
Yeah, it definitely is anachronistic. It is. I think public, feeling over it, about it over here is that, like it's just reaching the thing is, it's been hidden for years. It's only really in the last 12 months with a couple of very vocal female speakers who've come out and started an awareness around it, that this has started to come to life, because Parliament itself and, the government under Scott Morrison have, they've just done everything they can to sidestep this and try to keep a lid on it. But it's almost like a boil now that's popped, and I don't know what's going to come out of it, but bad metaphor there. But it is it's not good.
So it's I keep an eye on Australian news, but I don't remember it all. Brittany Higgins is the girl, the lady that stood up. She's been incredibly brave. And then there was one of the ladies who committed suicide because she was raped by a politician. He stepped down this week finally, right? Is that right?
Yeah, Christian Porter, who was a front bench minister and was sort of touted as a possible future prime minister. So his career is over. So there are people falling by the wayside with this, feeling that times are changing and they can't recover from it.
Yeah. All right, and then the final one you might have noticed is the US is moving forward on reducing the rights of women to abortions, which is obviously a long-term dream and strategy of the Republican Party. So we've talked about this before, and I know everybody has different opinions, but here's mine. Women have the right to the decisions over their body and their lives. Religion has no right in another person's body. All white men have no right to decide the choices for women. Christians in the US have more abortions than any other group. And if you really believe in life, then where are you once the baby is born? Nowhere, especially in the US. So for me, it's complete hypocrisy. It's a power play. It's a political game. And it's very, very concerning to me that this is happening at this time in the world. And I think everyone should be aware of it. Men are being controlled in a different way. Like this case in Australia with, men will be like, oh, we can't do anything. We can't talk to anything. We can't go out for lunch with women. So that's one side of it. And then on the other side of it, with the control of women's bodies. And I'm extremely concerned about where our societies are going when it comes to these sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, I mean, it's like that, bad behaviour and extremely bad behaviour in Parliament. It's just like men, whether it's actually physically or whether it's in legislation, somehow cannot keep their hands off women's bodies. It's really weird.
Yeah, it must be weird as guys. We've hung out together, and I don't feel under threat being around you guys. I know. I mean, I've had many times in my life where I've come across a dirty old man, and he's a risk, and every woman in the room knows he's a risk, right?
So you marry the man?
No. You can talk to Steve about that one. He's our number one listener. But like every woman knows those people. Every single woman on this planet knows those men, and the majority of guys are not like that. But what's happening is you guys, people like you, are saying, "Well, we've got to be careful now," and no, you don't. We're not talking about you. It's it's the creeps, and in Australian Parliament, it's the culture that sort of embraces this stuff. But on the other side, women, like their bodies, their right to make decisions. A single mother with 4 children who wants to have an abortion should be able to get an abortion. She should, because she can't be a great mum. She can't raise a great kid if she can't put food on the table, if she can't give them access to education, if the children can't be safe, if she can't be safe, she can't do that job, So anyway.
Well,
it's a minefield, that one.
Well, I mean, I'll go ahead and touch the rail, right? I mean, I do believe in terms of choices that everyone's supposed to be able to make, and that's definitely there. But I also understand the thinking and the belief that goes on the other side. And we can try and put religion aside, but if we, like, for instance, and this is a thought experiment, right? if we decided that until the age of 2, a child doesn't count as a human being, right? And if someone were to make such decisions like, socioeconomically, this is a bad idea, I think it's really time for us to get rid of this one. There would be trouble with that as well. I think what it is about that line where we start to accept, or we say the differences begin. And I do understand how it feels for those who really feel that very strongly. I mean, as I've said on the earlier show, my dad was a Catholic priest. I was brought up in the Catholic way. I understand intrinsically the idea about life, right? And then for the Catholics, it gets worse than abortion, right? Masturbation is wrong because you are squandering potential life. It's genocide because it's millions at a time, billions at a time, right? So it's about those kinds of thoughts and those kinds of beliefs, and I do have that feeling for them. So I do. And I do these ridiculous things that don't make me popular with people, but I do ask the question, like, so if you drew the line at 2 years old, how would you feel about that? It's really hard for me to, on the one hand, to say people who have convictions that they don't try and do what they believe is the right thing as well. I mean, both sides are doing what they think is the right thing.
But there's when we're fighting for the right for the LGBTIQA community to get married, right? The line was, if you don't believe in gay marriage, don't get gay married. And to me, if you don't believe in abortion, don't have one. Yeah. But why should your view be put on somebody who doesn't believe the same thing? It's just, to me, and you say, we'll take religion out of it. We can't take religion out of it. But in the US, it's a political tool. And it's so divisive, but it's also so uniting. But it is about religion. But the truth is, we have to get to the point where a woman's right to determine her own future and her destiny is her right. And birthing is part of that. And there's no responsibility for men in this mix. So... and they're part of the story too, right? So it's just allow women to make the decisions that they need to make to live the life that they want to make. And the other thing, of course, from a climate perspective, is we can't afford more people. So why would you want to take this away right now? We need to get control around the population, right? So
I think we should ban donuts.
Good.
If we banned yeah, no worries. I thought I'd jump in there. If we banned donuts, they'd become desirable. And then everybody would go and eat donuts instead of doing other things. But this is like you said, it's being used in the US in particular as a political tool between two parties whose line is drawn over various issues. And if you can polarize the voting community enough on a particular belief system, you'll get them voting for you, based on that one thing. So you could put up the gropiest candidate possible, and that was a circular reference back to the Australian Parliament. You put up the gropiest candidate possible, and they'd get voted in. Oh, well, that's happened. They'd get voted in, and because of their opinion on that particular issue. So if those decisions are being made based on politics, then that is abysmal. And that's really terrible. If the decision is, and it just sounds like it is. I mean, the thing is, with this particular, I mean, we did talk about this a few weeks back. With this particular issue, I'm with Andrea. I'm with Andrea. The woman should get the right to make the decision with regards to her own body, not some other person. With regards to something like this, my thing would be, can we at least give her, and this is a really tough one, because then the politics comes into who she listens to, but can we somehow say, here are lots of different opinions, make up your own mind? And And in those opinions are a representative sample of the various arguments. But the only thing is, what you don't want is somebody feeling guilty for the rest of their life because of some opinion or something. Because somebody feeling guilty for the rest of their life is really just putting them in prison, in emotional and psychological prison, for a decision that they made at the time, which may not have been a great decision, or may be an emotional decision, or may have been a decision out of fear, or a decision or whatever it was, But that's the challenge that I have. And if religious institutions are making somebody feel horrendously guilty and about themselves, then I don't think that institution is doing its God justice.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. And
it's one of these. It's a minefield. It's a big one.
It is.
And they've. I mean, in the States. I mean, I think it's almost a low for politics and religion working together. In that, with that Texas, ruling that came in where, you could dob in somebody that you saw, and now they're bringing the average person in, and then bringing back in social media into that, and this whole, I just think it's such a bad path that they're going down there.
They really are, and it's concerning, but these things ripple out around the world, and that's what we need to be paying attention. It's part of this big sort of change in the fabric of humanity across the world, and as we're getting ready for what's coming next in the world with the climate emergency, and how that's going to impact us, and the stability of life is being upended as we speak. But I mean, obviously with COVID, people are out of jobs, and we've got to make this rapid transition, and it's going to cost the poorest people in the world. There's a lot going on, right? And we're also going backwards in some of these other ideas, and it's like we can't see our own history, but none of us can see this future, because this is a path that humanity's never had to tread on before. So we should be focused there rather than trying to strip things back and repeating history like we've done ever since humankind was civilized, right?
Sorry, go ahead, Julian.
No, I'm just going to say, from the 1600s on, with the Renaissance and the Reformation, it's like we've been moving forward. And for the first time, in my, decades, I actually stop and think, okay, is it going the other way now? Mm-hmm. And is it, is this a time in history like, the lead up, in the 30s in Europe to World War II? Are we living through one of those phases now? Where big change is going to come. The Great Reset. Things can only go so far before it, the ratchet releases and it wants to go the other way.
Yeah, it becomes the Great Reject. Yep.
Yeah. We can't afford war. We can't afford the emissions of war. Not all the other bits of war, but we can't afford the emissions, right? So, it's like growing up, we tried to understand, how did that happen in Germany, right? How did the people, when you're talking about Hitler before, Joe, he was the leader, but the whole community got him there. What happened? How did that happen? How did those people turn a blind eye? How did they participate in that? And then I just remember growing up just trying to work it out, right? And now I'm like, this is how it happened. Here we go. Yeah. We're living through it.
So I read a great piece about a person in Austria talking about how her country ended up becoming under Hitler's rule, and they voted for him to take over. They said, "Yep, take us over," because everything was being they were hungry, there were lines, there was disorganization in the government. There was just nothing was happening properly. Everything was falling apart, and they just said, "Somebody come in and fix it." And they had promised it fixed, and once it was, everything fixed almost overnight. Everything was working brilliantly, which is interesting. And then, of course, they were roped into this machine, and everyone's drafted into wars and all this sort of stuff, and everything got a bit crap. But look, there is a positive in the fact that America's having this sort of decision, and they're doing this thing. The only positive, not on this particular issue, but one of the positives is we end up thinking about what is our position on this. If they weren't doing it, we don't really think. We just merrily go on our way and sort of live this superficial life. But we end up getting, we shouldn't have to have a legal, 300 million people or whatever it is, have to go through this. So there's the positive is we do end up going, where do I stand on this? Because nobody ever asks you at some point. Well, rarely they go, where do you stand? Or they do, you sort of move away from it. But this one, they'll be asked, what do you believe in? And at some point they'll have to vote. The bad part is, if this is political, it's just going to change in 4 to 8 years' time. It'll just flip back. And so it'll be this, and it'll just continual. I mean, over there, it just seems to be the most obvious. Keep the people arguing and fighting over stuff while we just merrily go on our way of ruling. It just seems to be like that. And the whole thing about over there, racism is just this constant narrative. Whereas everywhere else, it doesn't seem to be that we get caught up in the narrative, but it doesn't seem to be that. Like over here, people just get on with stuff. I mean, the racism argument comes up when somebody disrespects someone else. Somebody in a public life seems to disrespect somebody else, or people are feeling, and it becomes an outlet. But over here, it just seems to be okay. We all live together and we just get on with things. But over there, it is the constant narrative, all the time. And I don't know whether that's an unfair. I can see where an argument against that opinion is, in that it's always there. I'm just not hearing about it, or I'm not in it, or I'm not facing it every day, or whatever it is. But and I hear that all the time. I mean, I've forever lived as a minority wherever I've been. I'm the minority, but I would say I'm a privileged minority, so it's different. It's not a disadvantaged minority, so to speak. So it would, but that narrative is the thing that's happening, and I see some things are smoke screens, and some things, but it harms people. The smoke screen, when it goes into legislation, really does make a horrible difference to people's lives. But there's this, and so what it ends up doing is fueling aggression, fueling social enmity, and furthering distrust in power.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part, because when a virus comes out and power says take the vaccine, everyone goes, well, actually, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
The climate change, I don't trust you.
Yeah, the lack of trust that's been building up for the last 2 decades. It's certainly been an inconvenient time for us not to trust it. But you see in Asia and some parts of the world where trust is still very high, and in the institutions like government, business, but in countries where where it's kind of mattered, countries like the US where trust is so low, it's been a struggle. But let's get on to our topic of the week, which is the art of transforming yourself. And we're super happy to have Julian here to talk about this, because he believes that if you can learn, unlearn, and relearn, you get a huge competitive advantage in life, and that is the ability to be agile. So if you want to go from feeling like a victim of change to being in control of what's going on, Julian is the man. This is one of his keynote speeches, I believe. We all know Julian. He's brilliant. He's a brilliant speaker, leader, expert. Every time I've listened to you, Julian, I've really enjoyed it. So
I'm coming on this show again. This is
good. You should. That's true. A couple of people are excited to see you here today as well. So yeah, just want to hand it over to you, and let's get stuck into it.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, that's a great intro. I mean, I think, learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's what, American writer Alvin Toffler back in the 1970s, he was a futurist, and he wrote that. He said, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. He wrote this back in the 70s. And I just think it's so key, because what's happened is the way that we consume and use information has changed with this democratisation of information. And it used to be, like in our careers, that you went to school, you went to college, you went to uni, you did further education, and the more knowledge that you had, that was power. You could trade off that knowledge and that information. But it's changed, and knowledge used to be like a lake. You literally, the larger your lake of knowledge, that was fantastic. And you go in and dip your bucket and get a bit of knowledge when you need it out of that, use it effectively. But knowledge now is like a river. It's changed. It's just this constant flow of new information, and it comes so fast you can't store it. You can't think you can. And so what you do is it's like you just go onto Google and you dip in, you get the bit of knowledge you need at that time, just in time learning in a sense. And then, new stuff comes down. So we have to approach this differently, because we're also all living longer. So what is it now? A child who is born now, 1 in 2 children who are born now will reach 100 years old. And that's just going up every year. And so even me, I'm 60 now. I mean, even I am now.
No.
Yes, I am going to live and work much longer. I mean, even so, probably another 5 to 10 years worth of working life in there. The way employment, is changing, and superannuation is changing, and government support is changing, and so we have to have a new strategy, because this whole idea of the 3-phase life of you got an education and you went to work and you retire, that's like long gone. We're into this like a portfolio of different careers and different jobs that we're going to have. So, we have to prepare for that. And so if you've come out of this binary education system, which I think is just, it needs drastic changing. And that is that, you go to school and they tell you there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. And you've got to get the right answer. And if you don't get the right answer, we're going to put you back in and reprocess you and keep doing it until you get the right answer. So we all come out of school and then we go into this, career phase of our life too scared to do anything that might not be the right answer. So we play it safe. We get hooked on sticking at the status quo. And that, I mean, it worked, 20, 30 years ago. It is not working now. So what's going to happen? I mean, what's going to happen to you out there with, and look at what's happened with COVID, with now the whole work, shape of the workforce is changing, working from home with AI, with, it's hollowing out the workforce. It's going to create new jobs. It's going to kill other jobs, but things are changing. And I am passionate about helping people, and particularly people in middle age who really haven't stopped to think and consider these changes that are happening, to learn that you can learn the skills, you can become more agile. And I know this because I've lived these many changes throughout my life, and I know that I didn't know all this stuff, back when I first started. But now I know that there is, systems and processes that you can follow. They're imperfect, but it's a good starting point. So that's why, I jumped at this opportunity just to come on and, just to start people thinking about this. How are you guys with change? How do you find it?
I try to have new underwear every day or 3. But I've been terrible and good at the same time. So if you ask me whether I represent change, I am someone who's had change over and over again. So my darling wife and family have had in the last 25 years, we have moved 10 times, and I had no idea that was exceptional. I just thought that's what you do when you're trying to leverage up to the next property and make the next move and whatever it is. And so they've had that much change happening in their life, and I just thought it was the regular thing. So I have had maybe an overdose of change, as in, like, I have I have had very few things in my life where I strategically try to climb this mountain and then figure out how to get to the next level. So I found that I kept trying to mess things up because, like, I've done this now and I move to the next thing. So I began to destroy a lot of things. But I'm also very much along the bought into the idea that we can always change for the better. We can always, learn a more strategically smart thing to do, but it always does involve making a turn. The strategy is in one direction, but you're not going to keep getting there. You're not going to get there if you don't take the turns that you have to take. If you're going up a mountain, you're never just going to go straight up. You have to figure out the turns that will get you there in the end. So I think people spend too much time saying the goalpost has changed and not enough time steering, because when they see the goalpost has changed, what you should do is you should change, to try and work on getting onto this new goal. It's a smarter way, because if you want to insist that they move the goalposts back to where they were, good luck to you.
Yeah, I mean, but it's always changed. I mean, people talk now about unprecedented times. I don't get that. I mean, it's always unprecedented times. I mean, the world is always changing. This is unusual, and it's obviously a big issue of the last couple of years with COVID. But I don't see it that unprecedented. I just go, it's wake up every day, something odd is happening.
I'm hearing a freelancer. That's what it is. I'm hearing a freelancer.
And maybe that's it. But there was a lot of my life that I wasn't like that. But I got to the stage where I was, and you hinted at it there, Joe, that I actually started to self-sabotage what I was doing. I was actually craving change so much, and I've come to learn something about myself, is that my love of learning is greater than my ego. And what I mean by that is that, I built myself to, a certain level of status, say in the world of television. I was, very highly credentialed and ranked up there. And I walked away from it at the top of my game because I could start to feel I was stagnating. I was doing the same stuff over and over and over again. And that's when I walked away, and I took a program into the world, into schools, to teach philanthropy to school children. It was a commercial failure. It was hopeless. After 18 months of pushing this, I just could not get anything to take. So my TV career had sailed off into the distance, and I had to reinvent myself because it's basically running out of money. And I had a few magic skills, because as a cameraman, get this, apparently people don't trust the media. I know. Yeah. So I always used to carry a little bit of magic in my camera vest, because if you can bring out magic, it's great for building rapport with people, get people laughing, get the kids laughing. And so I had a few skills. So I built upon those and ended up being a professional magician. But to be that, I had to damage my status and go right back down to square one, to ground zero, to beginner level, and start to climb that ladder back up again. And I did that over a number of years in the world of magic. And it was very awkward at the start, because I was coming into another industry where people had spent their whole life. And I just, talk about imposter syndrome. And then I started to realize the value of coming into an industry with a fresh set of eyes, with a different perspective and different ideas. And that's when I started to vocalize some of those. And, I got, in one corner of the world of magic, built a certain level of prominence, and was able to build up a business based around that. And then the same thing happened. I started to feel that stagnation came in, and I self-sabotaged, and I sold that business. It still exists. And I walked away. You
saw yourself in half.
And and I've come to this world of speaking, and I came into the world of speaking down at ground zero, and I'm still just climbing the ladder on the way up. I mean, who knows where it's going to be? But there's a very, definite pattern there. And that is that, because, I just love learning. Now, I guess I'm lucky, I'm lucky to be curious like that. But if you're not curious, you've got to stop and start to think, what can I, do? What are the steps? And so this where, so I've actually helped people to do this. And I got a thing, it's just a quiet side hustle that I've got, called Footpath University. And I encourage people to go out on Footpath University because I'm out there at 5 a.m. every morning, and I go for a walk and I slip on a set of headphones and I listen to a podcast, and I change my thinking, learn something from the world's best people, all for free. And I do it while going for a walk. I call it big mind, small waistline. So, there's a way, if you're out there and you're listening and you're struggling about just, how do you start this process? That's an easy, low risk way just to get in, because if you can do it for 5 days, stretch it out to 10 days, stretch it out for a month. If you can do that for a year, you've already changed. And that's the whole thing. This is all about, it's, change. Change is not a process. I used to think change was a process. And I met this guy. I'll tell you where I learned this from. I met a guy named Jimmy Filiaggi. His nickname was Jimmy Diffuse Filiaggi. This was in Lorain County in Ohio in the USA. And Jimmy was your tough punk kid around town. And he was always getting into fights when he was young. And he had this anger problem. This anger problem rose up. And he got the nickname the Fuse because if you poked him in the chest during a fight like this, it's like the fuse went off and you were just down and out, and you had this like list of aggravated assaults behind him. This anger management boiled over one day, got in an argument with his wife, Lisa, and he put a gun to her head and pulled the trigger, killed her. He was charged with murder, and he was sentenced to death. And so I met him on death row in Mansfield State Penitentiary in Ohio. And the reason I was there, we were doing a documentary on the science of anger. And Jimmy had, willingly put himself up to be sort of, questioned by us. And so we had an hour with him and, visited him on death row. And death row is like a prison within a prison within a prison. And it's a sort of like hard place to get into. So when you're in there, you make the most of it. And we only had an hour, and they were really strict with this. And, it's funny. I remember before I saw Jimmy, I heard him, because I could hear, because he's shackled from ankles up to his waist and then, waist to his wrists. And I could hear him shuffling in the chains coming up the corridor. And he came in, and he's a big guy, about 6'3" and probably about 120 kilos, and of Italian descent. And, this guy murdered his wife, and it's a bit odd, but it's really weird. He was really charming. And after an hour, I sort of felt quite comfortable with him. Anyway, the hour came up and the prison guards came to take him out. And as he was going out and shuffling out, I just thought, you don't get this opportunity very often, to, be face to face with someone in this situation. So as he was going out, I just said, hey, Jimmy, just before you go, if there's one thing you can share with me, might help me, anything. And he said, yeah, okay. And he said, come here. Remember, he's a big guy, 120 kilo, about 6'3", shackled, on death row. I said, come here. So I walked closer. He said, come closer. I got a little bit nervous. And he said, lean forward. So what do you mean? He said, lean forward, down, put your head down. So I started to lean. And then as I was putting my head down, I heard the snap of the little chains where his hands came out from his waist and went tight, and the chain went snap. And then I felt his fingers tap my temples. And he just did this. And he said, 8 inches. You're always 8 inches away from the best decision of your life, the worst decision of your life. And it was the last thing he said. He turned away and just walked away and never saw him again. But and that's when, and I started, because I went, okay. And it took me a couple of years to unpack this. And because I always used to think change was a process, and it's not. Change is a decision. And every time I look back on everything I've always done through my life, it's the point I really decided. And when I say when you decide, it's not like, I'm going to do this today. It's an emotional decision. Every big change, every switch I've made has started with tears, because what happens is I almost mourn. I've made a decision. I'm giving something up, and I mourn that part of my life. I mean, I can remember the times sitting on the kitchen bench crying about walking away from 25 years in TV. But that's the point of change, because once you've made that decision, it's like when someone tries to teach, you can't make someone learn something, but if you've decided to learn something, if you've really decided, no one can stop you. And that's where change comes in. And so if you can get to this point of finding a purpose, it's not motivation. You don't want to be motivated. Motivation is people misunderstand motivation. Most people think like getting up in a chair and a Tony Robbins thing is being motivated. No, it's not. That's just being excited. That's just motivation is not an input. And people get this confused. Motivation is an output. Motivation comes afterwards. So it starts with a purpose. And that's the hard thing to find. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but when you find your purpose, you start taking the steps, and then that's discipline. That's where discipline comes in, self-discipline. And people get freaked out about self-discipline and say, I've got no self-discipline. I go, yes, you have. Yes, we've all got self-discipline. You all drive. You all drive down the road and there's a white line in the middle of the road. Well, it's not a steel barrier that stops you going over. You have purpose. Your purpose is to keep living. So you make a contract that you'll stay on that side of the road. That's self-discipline. The point of that is when you get home, you don't go, oh, that's an exhausting drive today, trying to stay on the side of the road. It's self-discipline when you understand it and work it out at its core essence is actually quite effortless. So it's about taking some of the steps. And when you see the early results, that's when motivation kicks in. And when motivation kicks in, you get a bit more motivation, you take a few more steps, a bit more motivation. And when that happens, this is the joy, because motivation is an anesthetic for hard work. When you're motivated, you will just keep going at something. And it's at that, and so it's understanding that and not getting attached to your emotions. We've got this crippling connection between outcomes and emotions. We say, oh, I want to do it, I'm only going to do it when I feel right. No, we say that to our kids. Our kids go, we say, clean your bedroom. Like, I don't feel like it. You go, I don't care what you feel like, just clean your bedroom. But we tend to forget this as adults, and we want, if we're doing something, for it to feel a certain way. And that's what self-discipline is. It's doing tasks without emotions. But it's just unpacking this. And so this is what I was sort of going back to saying, I didn't understand this. I just was going through the process. But now I've unpacked this. And when you can share this with people and put it in some sort of order and help them along the way, you actually give people like a little signposted route that they can follow if suddenly they're faced with change. Yeah. So, that was a big mouthful.
No.
I'd like to summarize that in a poem. So now is the winter of our discontent. So would you say that? So Julian, I mean, I find this really interesting, and I would advise everybody listening to book Julian before he gives up on professional speaking and self-sabotages that part, because he's really very good at it. But you were talking about, and in a sense, you were crying at the change, and mourning at it, and yet it sounds to me like the trigger for such change is either loss of income or loss of satisfaction, of whatever that's driving satisfaction is, whether that is connection, whether that is growth for you. You're saying I wasn't learning anymore, I felt like I was stagnating. But the two sound like financial is a big one for people to accept the change, because as the finances are hitting them, it's coming at them like a Mack truck. It's really, they can see it. They've got evidence, they've got reports that are saying that the money's not coming in or it's drying up. I need to make a shift. And they break up with their own life. They're the ones breaking up rather than their old life breaking up with them, sort of thing. And or maybe that's the case. Maybe that's it. The old life is breaking up with them. And so they're out on their own. And in a sense, that because you're saying you're teaching people in midlife to make these big changes.
No, sorry. I'm just going to jump in. No, sorry. And that was bad communication on my part. If I said I'm not teaching people to make changes, I'm helping people be prepared for when a change comes, that they've started a process of thinking and that they have a little roadmap that they can follow. Because you can be working, you can be working full time and you can be starting to think about this and go, well, listen, am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? Well, if you look at all the statistics, no, you're not, because, we don't have jobs for lifetimes now. So you need to start preparing for this. So that's what I'm saying. I'm helping people get in the mindset and give them at least a rough process. So they go, oh, okay, I think I can, work my way out of this.
Break glass and press that button, because at least I know where to press.
Yeah.
So I was just going to take you back, Julian, to my teenage years. My ambition was, Australians will understand this, my ambition was never to be anywhere long enough where I'd be earning long service leave. So in Australia, that's 10 years of service and you get long service leave, which I think is 3 months, right? Anyway, for some bizarre reason, I don't know what it is, but when I was a teenager, I could see people glorifying in this 3 months off, and they spent 10 years working towards this 3 month off, and I just didn't appeal to me. So when you asked the question earlier, how are you with change? I'm addicted to it. And when you were talking about decisions, so for me, I did a podcast recently where we were defining courage. And for me, courage is the decisions that you make. You can choose comfort, or you can go outside of your comfort zone where the real growth is and where the real opportunities are and where the unknowns are. But even if you fail, it's still going to take you somewhere forward. So, but yeah, my ambition has always been that. So, but my biggest ambition has always been freedom. So changing for me is like, I'm just following the path. I've never given the same speech twice. Do you know that? And that's really hard, because it'd be nice to be able to sort of practice it a bit more and get better at them. But I never give the same speech twice, and they're like fundamentally completely different speeches. So, yeah. So change is I'm not scared of it, I suppose, and I hear what you're saying, and like just that the footpath club, I think such a beautiful example. Getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, no way, not me. But and also when I walk on the beach here in Phuket with my dog and throw balls. So I'm not listening. I don't want to listen. That's when I'm off. No one can call me. Nobody can talk to me. But walking around on the footpath, getting your steps up, listening to a podcast, learning, build that up over a year. Wow, that's fantastic, right?
Yeah, and I want to pick up on courage, because to me, this is one of the core problems out there. And I understand that it's scary, it's difficult, and people are all in different situations. I acknowledge all of that. So encourage. What we're talking before too about how we think about what we do. My purpose, my big purpose, I don't really talk about too much, is to encourage people. But just let me tell you the etymology of that word. So N is to put on, to facilitate, to make happen. And courage is the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty. So when you encourage someone, you're saying that I worked a way over this problem and I want to gift that to you. That's what encourages. Encourage isn't, oh, come on, chill up. It's not that. It's actually, I'm doing something bigger. I want to help you with the experiences that I've had. But there's a problem out there, because as much as we should be doing that, the counter is happening. And I call it the great discouragement, because these stories of courage, they used to be passed down from father to son and mother to daughter, and priest to congregation and uncle to all the kids in the village. But where are the storytellers now? They've sort of disappeared, and they've been replaced with this 24/7 commercial message that's very clear what it tells us. It tells us that there's an external solution to our internal problems. And I said, like, if she doesn't love you enough, buy her a bigger ring. If you want to impress the person more, get a bigger car. If you want to lose weight, take a pill. There's an external solution to your internal problem. And I think we've unwittingly slipped into this habit of outsourcing our personal responsibility. And I just think that is a major problem. And I don't know a way around it apart from doing the small bit that I do here, which is just discussing this, because that is working against the opposite way to actually make change, to go from feeling regret that you never did something to, you know, a feeling of reward. I call it the daily dose. It's a daily dose of mild discomfort. Change isn't, I've never found change hard. It's not easy, but it's not hard. I mean, I'll tell you what hard is. When I lose somebody in my life that I love, that's hard. That just tears my guts out. But doing something a little bit, you know, out of my comfort zone every day is just what I call the daily dose of mild discomfort. But it's just so hard for people to even start that process when you have this other message, this great discouragement coming, you know, telling you all the time, well, you know, it's not really your responsibility. Somebody else should fix this for you. And we've sort of slipping into this almost parental, you know, system, you know, yeah. Anyway, I could ramble on about that for ages.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're, you know, some of the greatest thinkers at the moment, you know, especially Americans, talking, you know, about how do you fix yourself, right? And a lot of the conversation is about going to therapists, and I listen to it, and I'm like, we've got to work on ourselves. We've got to go within ourselves. We've got to, you know, the self-awareness. I think there's a self-awareness crisis. We don't, you know, you're talking about emotions earlier. Too many people are being controlled by their emotions, and they're not in control of their emotions, and they're not capable of standing back from those emotions and going, whoa, 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 you know, that shouldn't be in control. I should be in control. It's not about not feeling the emotions. It's not about not allowing yourself to sink into the emotions, but they shouldn't be in control of you all the time. And I think it's a self-awareness crisis, you know, and it's like you're saying, where everything's external, distractions, noise. We're out, and all these solutions are being offered to us. But actually, you know, if you go traveling in America, you cannot go into a room anywhere without a TV blaring at you. There's always noise. Everywhere you go, there's noise. And then you're eating food that's made up of chemicals. And, you know, it's just like, it's consuming people. But I think it's a self-awareness crisis. Just knowing who we are.
Yeah. But, you know, like I love working with boofy blokes, you know, because you talk about self-awareness, and you could they all do this, you know, like, and where's all this woo-woo stuff coming from? And I always break it. So self-awareness to me is completely different. I put it actually in a scientific frame. And I just go, imagine you're like a scientist. You know, you got a white lab coat on, and you've got a clipboard and a pen, and you just step outside yourself for a day. So you're wandering around there, and there's you with your clipboard, and you're just watching yourself, taking notes about what you do. And I said, that's all self-awareness is just going, oh, so going off autopilot and just being a bit more aware of you do, you know, that. And then the next step is, you know, so what's the easiest thing that you can do? Right? If you're self-aware, what's the easiest thing to do to make your life, your family's life better? And it comes down to, when something happens, you've got a choice. Are you going to react, or are you going to respond? And I said, like most people, I spent most of my life just reacting. I just going on, and then when someone, I can't remember who, finally explained it to me, you know, there's another option. And it's like, I think it's Mel Robbins in the States who has that count to 5 or something, which is just the simplest thing. Just count to 5 before you open your mouth, and maybe something different will come out and you'll react differently. And I found that simple hack has, you know, helped my family life. I mean, I'm like anyone else, you know. I'm flawed. Ask my wife.
I think for me, Neil Donald Walsh really summed it up well. anger expressed is never about the person that you're expressing it towards. It's always about you. And I probably heard that 15, 16 years ago. And when my boys were really small, right? And I'd be out with them and I'd be like, "Rrr." And I'd be like, right, okay, what's this about? It's not about them. They're just young. They're going to be annoying. That's what children do. What is this about? And I had to work really hard to be honest with myself about the answer, but I was frustrated being a parent to young children. I didn't like entertaining children. It was just that that's not who I am, right? So I'd go, and this was before, like when my boys were small, laptops weren't as abundant. iPads basically were I don't even think they existed, right? So I would be in these environments like an indoor playroom, and my kids would be running around having a blast, and I'd be just sort of sitting there going, tapping my feet, waiting for the time to be over, because I couldn't be productive in that scenario. So I was resentful of the situation, but it wasn't about them. It was about me. And I talked to my husband about it, because men, men can be quick to anger. And it's like, so what are you angry about?
Who said that?
Yeah, what are you angry about? Like the pandemic was amazing in the first few weeks with my husband. I'm like, so tell me how you're feeling. Well, what are you talking about? No, come on, tell me how you're feeling. And eventually he goes, well, yeah, I don't know if we've made the right decision. I don't know if I can take care of my family. I don't, I'm like, yeah, okay. That's why you're talking the way you're talking, because that's how you're feeling right now. So stop being angry, and projecting it onto other people, and just accept that that's how you're feeling, and accept it, and let's move forward. And it's okay to be, and then that story, the big buff blokes, my husband's one of them, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's the most courageous thing you can be. There was an article on mental health in young men and boys, and they're too ashamed to get mental health help. And so they're really, really suffering. And we've got a problem in our societies. If our young men are suffering with mental health issues, they grow into big men that aren't really great people to have in societies. They go and hang out in Australia's parliament, and that's a problem, right? So we've got to help them.
Yeah, and talking about being vulnerable, and just to switch to video for a moment, it is, if you can be vulnerable on video now, it is so powerful, because it's anti-perfectionism, it's anti the status building. It's just going, sharing your vulnerability and your flaws, and also being what works really well on video is if you share your journey with people. So whatever you're doing, you say, look, this is where I am now, and I'm struggling with this too. And people love that. What's that saying? People don't want perfect, they want process. They love to know and understand what your process is that you're using. So, I mean, anyone who might be listening, who's in this game of personal branding, that sort of thing, getting on and just opening up and being vulnerable. People love it, and they also love it because when people are judging you on video, they're asking two things always. First up, they're looking for warmth and credibility. They want the credibility because they want to know, can you actually help me? Because if not, maybe I don't need to be here. The other thing is they want warmth because they want to know, can I work with you? And I don't know which is the best one, the most important one to have. I always think warmth is, because I think it just opens the door a little bit, like you can open the door and just peek in and see what's going on in there. Anyway, they came off vulnerability.
Yeah, nice. Well, this has been lovely, and I think we've gone into different places than we were even expecting. So rather than doing the other news that's captured your attention, unless there's anything you really, really want to share about news that's captured your attention.
Not news, no. I steer away from it.
This is good.
But there's two stories I want you to look out for. So my friend Andrew Sariano shared an Internet Minute in 2021. Have a look at that. There's also another article in Futurism called Science Creates Synthetic Organisms That Can Reproduce. I know it sounds scary to a lot of people, but have a look at that. It's in the Weekend Reads. It's a really, really, really interesting one. But so let's sign off with what's keeping you distracted at the moment. People like this bit, by the way.
Oh, okay. I can tell you, 13 Minutes to the Moon. Have you ever? It's a BBC documentary podcast. It was made about 2 years ago about the Apollo missions. It is just wonderful. So they take, so when the Apollo lander left the command module to go to the moon, it took 13 minutes, and they have all that radio transmission between mission control and the astronauts, and so you learn who all the characters are, and they tell their backstories, and they unpack it in a way that I've never heard before. Go and listen to, I don't know what the episode number is, but it's called Saving 1968, as an example of what we should aspire to as storytellers. Oh, if you don't cry at the end, you're dead inside, I tell you. It is so good. That's what's distracting me.
All right.
Very nice.
Awesome. Tim?
Sold. Actually, I want to, Julian, I want you to go and watch The Mysterious Benedict Society. As a filmmaker, you will love the way that they have shot it, and your story of this sort of underlying narrative about telling us that there's this emergency or there's this problem in the world and being fed that information. They call it the emergency. I think you're going to like the story, and it's wonderful storytelling. It's sort of kidsy, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. What's been keeping me occupied, Andrea, is when you make these New Year's resolutions about, okay, I'm going to finally clear out the storeroom, and or when I have some downtime, I'm going to clear out the storeroom. Well, this week I had that bit of downtime, and I've been saying I'm going to clear out the storeroom, especially these 3 big boxes. And these 3 boxes have traveled with me from Australia to Hong Kong to Singapore, and I'm going through it now, and it's got stuff that is like from 2002 and 1998 in it that I've been carrying around. It got to the point where I went online. I was going to buy this super duper scanner called the Caesar, CZUR, which was basically a camera sitting on an arm with a couple of lights on the side that would take these photos and flatten everything out and everything. And I went, oh, I should buy that. It's $500. Oh no, there's a $200 one. Oh, there's a $300. And then I got all confused. And then I went, oh, hang on a minute, I've got a phone. So, and I've got the app. I already had the app called Genius Scan. So I've just set it up on top of a bench on top of my dining table and put a black background down the bottom. And I've just been scanning these things. So I'm finally freeing up storage space so I can put other crap in there. But I'm scanning all.
Just tell me it's not going to landfill. Just tell me it's not going to landfill. Like paper can go into compost. Have you done that?
I don't know. Well, it's gone into the recycling bin. Going into the recycling bin. So I don't know how they recycle it, but presumably it's recycled in a reasonable way. But so that's where it's going. But yeah, I mean, I'm. It's the most boring thing in the world, but it's kind of cool because the reason why I kept all of these pieces of paper is because I thought that'd be a really good blog post, or that'd be a really good thing, or I could turn that into a training program, or that could be a good this. And so actually going through it, and I'm not spending a lot of time reading it because if I do that, I'll just go down a rabbit hole. But I'm skimming it and I'm going, that is interesting. And as I'm taking the photos of it, I'm putting them into folders and all this sort of stuff. Basically, I'm digitizing the storeroom, and it's liberating from a clearing out the clutter perspective. And one of the things that I wrote about last year, and I'll write about it again shortly, is start your New Year's resolutions now, because they've got a better chance of happening if you don't fall over by the 2nd of January. So so if you want to go for those morning walks that Julian was talking about, or the podcast walks, or the footpath university, then start doing that now, and sort of get over the I don't want to do 5 a.m. I'll do 5 p.m. or whatever it is, and so that January 1 starts, well, maybe January 2, depending on if you drink, starts really well.
It's my birthday on January 1, so I certainly don't.
You got permission. You got double permission. Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, that's what's been distracting me.
It's awesome. Awesome. And perfect pandemic activity to clean out your life. I've done it quite a few times in the last 2 years. Joe?
Well, I'm instantly distracted by hearing these ideas saying I should be doing that, and we'll work on that. But what I did since the last show is something that I never did before, which was basically to say, hell, I'm just going to do it right now, and now I'm doing it. So since the last show, I've actually just gone ahead and said I'm going to be doing a mentorship, a group coaching for trading. And enough people had asked me and said, I'm interested to do this, and I just said, okay, yeah, let's do it. And what's happened is next Tuesday is the start of this program that I'm going to be working on, and the whole mission of this is to take everyone in this group to the level that my mentor is at, and he's got that ability right now. And when you see what he does, you go like, he takes $1,000 at the start of the month and ends the month with $288,000, and you go like, okay, I'll pay attention now. So yeah, exactly. So the idea is to take that wisdom and translate it, because he's a great trader, not as good as a teacher, and I've been working very hard. And I'm not the best student as well, so we've been struggling along. It's taken me 7 to 8 months, but I'm trying to make this take a little less time, but to try and get the essence across. So that's got me busy right now in my head. As to something that you can all experience, it's not hard to recommend Apple's podcast show of the year to everyone, but you may not have heard about it yet. And it's something called A Slight Change of Plans. And this one is by Maya Shankar. You may have heard Maya Shankar's story. She was on the way to being a world-class violinist. In fact, she was. She actually had direct tutelage from, I forget the name now, but basically the best violinist in the world. And she had an injury that stopped that path. So she was in Juilliard on her way to becoming this world-class concert violinist, already actually in that state. And she was injured, and so she could not do that. And so she went on and became someone who studies neuropsychology or neuroscience instead. I don't have the biography properly, but she's now also leading in that field, doing significant things. And the particular episode that I'm going to recommend you have a look at is the one called Maya's Slight Change of Plans. Because the whole show is about interviewing different personalities and the way we respond to change. And she had something really, really, really significant happen in her life in the last couple of years as well. And she turned the microphone on herself and shared the story. So like the story that Julian talks about, where if you don't end off the episode in tears, you're not human. I'm going to say this is one of those episodes as well. So Maya's Slight Change of Plans. The name of the podcast is Slight Change of Plans. And not surprisingly, it has won or been nominated or been voted as Apple's show of the year.
Cool. I'll have a listen.
Wow.
All right. So for me, listening to you guys, I'm going in a different tangent. So when the pandemic started, especially when we were in that real total lockdown right at the beginning, we got into doing movie nights with the boys in a more structured sort of once a week. We're having a movie night, and it's probably tonight based on what's going on. Anyway, one of my boys couldn't be bothered. He's 13, nearly 14. He just wants to game. But the other one loves it. And I don't know, times have been so miserable lately. I've said I'll only do a movie night if it's a comedy. So we've been watching really great comedies, Ben Stiller type, all those sort of guys, right? And I just had an epiphany the other week. I'm like, he's not watching female comedy, and we need to watch some female comedy. So we watched Girls Trip with him. Have you guys seen Girls Trip? Tiffany Haddish, Queen Latifah.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm sorry, but can I just say one word that will upset you if you've seen the movie already? Grapefruit.
Yes, exactly. So Bridesmaids, I think, needs to be next. But I just sort of went, there's not enough great female comedy out there in the world, but I've got an opportunity to raise a son where he can get a balanced perspective through his parents, right? He's got the same sort of twisted sense of humor. He likes a bit of filth, we like those sort of jokes, right? And he's 15 now and he's old enough for it. So, yeah, my current thing is trying to work out brilliant female comedy that my son can watch. So if you've got any recommendations, I'm open to them. But I'll probably watch Bridesmaids tonight.
Yeah, but keep the grapefruit away, man. Ooh.
Okay, no more spoiler alerts.
I don't want to talk about that. No, you can't. That's not spoiling at all. All right. So should we wrap it up? We have done our usual beautiful 2 hours. Julian, thank you so much for joining us. That was such a beautiful, heartfelt conversation. It wasn't really where I thought we were going to go, but then we never really do we, guys?
No. I really liked it. Julian, I just, for anyone who'd never seen Julian, well, you've just heard him speak today, but if you haven't seen him present, there are not very many people in my mind that present so thoughtfully, beautifully, and visually like jaw-droppingly wow. And Julian, you're one of them, because you're a master craftsman, and you craft speeches and deliver them brilliantly. I just authentically, but just visually stunning, and just very, very clever and well thought out. And so highly recommend, if you're looking for somebody to just wow your audience, Julian's the guy.
Yeah, and definitely a man-ambassador in the world.
Yeah, a man-ambassador. Yeah,
a man-ambassador. I've been called
especially for bushy men.
Yeah, you're all man-ambassadors. These are the best of men. We need the man-ambassadors.
We are the best of men and the worst of men. I'm back to where I'm back to now.
We need the man-ambassadors and the matriarchs to come together and create a new world. So that's one of my missions. I've got a few missions, Julian, but yeah. There we go. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. And we'll see you next week. I think next week we've got 2 more weeks, and then we're going to have a break, right?
Yes.
No. We have 2 more weeks, and then the audience gets to get a break.
Yep.
I think I need the break too. But anyway, all right. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you soon. All right. Bye.